Tickets. Tickets, please. Step inside, take a ride upon the terror train. All aboard, be fair warned, these rails house fear and pain. Find a seat, don't mind the heat, just pray the lights stay on. Upon these rails, these bloody rails, in darkness lies no dawn. Yes, step inside, come crawl or glide, with us you shall remain. Upon this ride, this hellish ride, we call the terror train. Ticket, please. James Ward Kirk Publications presents Terror Train, Episode 107, Indiana.
Welcome aboard. Welcome to my home. I am the Disembodied Voice, your ghost host, so to speak. Call me Terror. Welcome to my train. Be you dead, undead, or of the living. Tonight, on this dark and devious night, we close our doors behind Murphy Edwards permanently. He boards from Indiana. In exchange for his mortal soul, he has penned a most terrifying tale. A tale reminding us that a train wreck isn't at all what it appears to be. Well, nothing here upon my train is what it seems until the lights go out. Just wait, you'll soon see. Take a seat. That's right. As Murphy Edwards hands over his bloody ticket, which reads Strunke City Derail.
Take it, please. Strunke City Derail by Murphy Edwards. My daddy-paw was a critter of habit. Always put his shoes and socks on the same way. Parked his beat-down, rusted-up shit-box of a pickup truck in the same muddy spot outside our trailer home, and took the same bologna meat sandwiches and banana cream cakes in his lunch bucket every day. Predictable and reliable as one of them Switzerland watches he was. So when he made it all the way home and up our rock steps before noticing for sure he'd forgot his lunch bucket and thermos bottle, I knowed he'd be going back to the rail yard to fetch it. I just happened to be in the front yard when he asked if I wanted to ride along. I wished I'd said no, but I didn't. Been pitiful sorry about that ever since. Anyhow, before you could say Johnny Baxter in a laundry basket, we was in his rusted-down Ford pickup, splashing and banging our way back down the mud-dirt road what leads to Strunke City. Strunke City is a little old piss-hole of a town about 20 miles outside of Who Gives a Shit. With a population of only 200, it weren't really a city at all, just a lonely burg at the ass end of nowhere. The one and only thing it ever had going for it was the rail yard for unloading big old trunks of iron and farm machinery, and them low-slung hulks of equipment they used up at the coal mines. That rail yard employed most near everybody within 100 miles of Strunke City, including my daddy-paw. By the time we got ourselves to Strunke City proper, we knowed there had been something terrible wrong take place. Daddy-paw said he hadn't seen that many people ogling and gawking around the rail yard since President JFK had rolled through in some streamlined Zephyr car. We didn't make it more than a few feet inside the yard before Jim Ed Summers stepped up to the truck and started gnawing on Daddy-paw's ear like a swarm of July skeeters. His face was all drawed up and snow-white, like them folks you see in them for sure real and scary vampire movies, after they done had all the blood and vapors suckled out of their neck. "It was awful, Carl," Jim Ed shouted. He called my daddy-paw Carl on account of that was his right and proper Christian name. I never called him that for fear of being on the front end of a serious ass-beating, but that was his God-given name. May well be the most awful damned thing I ever saw in my 47 years on this good and precious earth, Jim had continued. My daddy-paw pushed his hat back a notch or two on his head and waited for Jim Ed to light a smoke and finish his story. Daddy-paw, he don't smoke no more since them surgeon doctors yanked a tumor the size of a Granny Smith apple out of his neck. That's why he's forevermore chawing on a piece of stick gum or sugar candy, on account of that nicotine he still goes to craving. He still paws at his shirt pocket a great deal, though, looking for them god-awful coffin nails. That's what he calls them. Them doctors never did say for sure that tumor was brought on by smoking, but Daddy-paw reckoned it weren't worth taking no chances. Jim Ed took a long drag on his cigarette and huffed smoke into the truck cab. This highball, slick-looking engine came hauling ass into the yard at a full gait, dragging a shitload of train behind it. Ignored all the signals, jumped the switch out at the end of the yard and kept right on coming. You never seen such a load of sparks and hot metal commotion in your life. Looked like Satan his own self had set up a blacksmith shop right here next to the terminal. Once that engine jumped the track, everything behind it followed along and commenced to folding up like one of them accordion music boxes. Now, my daddy-paw always said old Jim Ed was full of more shit than a well-fed country goose, so I waited to see for my own self what was what. Daddy-paw shoved another stick of gum in his mouth and allowed it to limber up some before he went to chewing. "The engineer okay?" Jim Ed shrugged. "Don't know. Ain't found him yet. Saw him plain as day up in that cab when he ran that switch, though. Looked like he had a wild boar with the rabies riding in his lap." My daddy-paw jammed the truck into park and switched off the key. Suppose he had a heart attack or some such? Jim had crushed out his smoke with a muddy boot heel and lit up another. "I'm truly damned if I know, Carl, but something had that old boy shook to the bone. That ain't the half of it, though. Once that whole hoo-ha started coming off the track, I swear that boy hit the throttle to try to get more speed. What in Handley's hell would make a man do that? Best we have a look, Daddy Paul said. Since I weren't told not to, I went along. Downright sorry I did, too. We walked along the track as far as we could till all that train heaved up on itself stopped us from going further. Found the engineer, someone hollered from inside a ball of twisted-up metal and dirt. They hauled a ripped and bloody mess of overalls and meat out of the wreck and plopped it onto the cinder rail bed, not more than 2 feet from my shoes. Now, that engineer fellow was messed up good and proper, guts all mashed out of his mouth and such. Made me sort of glad I hadn't ate my supper meal yet. What I puzzled on most was the look in his eyes. I swear, as sure as Jesus be our Lord and Savior, he appeared as happy as a herd of cows sunk up to their bellies in cool pond water. Daddy Paul stood over him for a good long time, and then blew out a long blast of air like a truck tire with a roofing nail in it. "Sweet Lord," he said. "That boy was more likely dead before that train ever come to a fool and told a stop." We clumb over that mashed-up engine and looked around at the biggest derail ever to hit Strunke City. Mixed in with all them coal cars and chemical tank jobs was the biggest, ugliest chunk of Pittsburgh steel and gray iron I'd ever set my eyes on. Daddy Paul said he'd seen near every type and kind of railroad gizmo on this here planet, exceptin' this thing. The sides of that car was painted up all black and orange, with an evil-looking silver quarter moon on each corner. Big, tall words was lettered out nice and proper on the side that weren't buried up in coal, mud, and other rail cars. Them letters spelled out, "Shull Fruit and Vegetable Express." I ain't never seen fruit hauled in nothing like this. "Some bitch," Daddy Paul said. "I reckon that's right near the most god-awful smell ever to go up my nose." He was right, too. Had a sort of deer on the side of the highway, road dead, bloated out, and blowing flies kind of smell to it. Like I said, good thing I hadn't took in my supper meal yet, or I'm sure it would be out of me and splattered on old Jim Ed's steel-toe boots right there and then. By the time we worked our way through the pile and up close to that black and orange rail car, it was pitch dark, and I had yanked my t-shirt up over my face to hold back the stink. Jim had lit up another smoke and puffed it hard. For once I was glad to have that smoke in my nose. Sort of took the sharp edge off of whatever was leaking its way out of that fruit car. Most of the looky-loos had gone home by this time. Guess they figured there weren't much else to keep them from their shuck bean and cornbread suppers. I'm right here to tell you, they was dead wrong on that too. Daddy Paul followed behind Jim Ed's smoke trail as they crawled over a pushed-up pile of gravel, rock, and coal. Weren't within 3 steps of that great old big fruit car when the door crashed open and the stinkiest, hairiest shit pile of a critter lumbled out and did a dive-do around their feet. Daddy Paul rolled behind the ass end of the car, but Jim Ed caught a blow from that bastard's tail that sent him ass over appetite into the cinders. Tiny bits of rotted sweet melon and celery hung from its jaws and dripped down on Jim Ed's boots. I declare, that shunker was so ugly even the flies wouldn't land on it. I'm not 100% sure if it was the smell or the sight of it, but I'm telling you, that beast scared the pure blood hell straight out of me. Ain't ashamed to say it either. I pissed my pants right there in front of God and everybody. The beast went to work on Jim Ed like he was one of them fancy New York strip steaks. Once it had the better part of Jim Ed's upper half crammed down his neck, old Jim Ed commenced to twitch and holler like a backcountry preacher caught up in tongues. Quick as a snap, his head disappeared inside that smelly bastard, a cigarette still clamped in his teeth. Daddy Paul picked up a fire axe and took several good and proper swipes at that shunker's head. He connected on more than 1 or 2 occasions, too. That old beast looked at Daddy Paul like he'd been swatted with a willer switch. Never so much as let out a grunt. After dodging and darting around the coal piles and wreckage for near half an hour, Daddy Paul laid into that shunker so hard with that axe it split the top of its head clean open. At that point, and I swear this for the truth, another smaller head eased out of the top and went to snapping and growling like a badger. Jim Ed used to have an old yeller and brown flea-bit dog what ran along behind him, snapping and yapping at his heels like a baby gator. I swear that second little beast head reminded me so much of that dog, I busted up laughing before I could catch myself. Well, first thing that new head did was shook its neck out straight and hard, sprout half a dozen new little mouths, and snatched that fire axe right directly out of Daddy Paw's hands. Next thing it did was snatch Daddy Paw up and swallow him like a fishing worm. Quick as a cat, I jumped into the cab of one of them big and dangerous track hoes that they used to dig out dirt and coal and such. What I knew, and that old ugly rail car sumbitch didn't, was that Daddy Paw had let me run that very track hoe now and then. Not regular and steady, just every now and then when no tight-assed bosses and such was around to rag on him. Now, I'm not here to tell you I was no expert or nothing. Far from such, but I could make that machine move forward and back, lower and raise that steel-toothed bucket, and swing it around at a good clip. Not much use for digging and loading stuff, but maybe enough to fight off some ugly fruit car beast with 2 heads, 7 mouths, and breath like 1,000 assholes. Had me a bucket load of trouble getting that machine to start up and run steady. I took several hard swipes from that ugly beast's tail while I fiddled with the starter switch and prayed for some kind of divine intervention. I don't mind telling you, I was considerable shook up. Yet every day you witness your own sweet daddy swallowed up by some ooze stink lump from a train wreck. Between pulls on that starter switch and prayers up to the man up on high, that shunker managed one good bite on me and laid open a gash that ran from my elbow to my wristwatch. Bled out like a cut-open hog on the butcher's hook. Daddy Pa always said the sun eventually shines on every dog's ass. He sure was right on that one, 'cause the odds started stacking up in my favor. Once I got that track hoe fired up and rolling, I set them steel tracks to chewing on that thing's tail end. Mashed its ass end flatter than a paper picnic plate. Then I dropped the bucket on its back so it weren't likely to crawl off. First thing you know, it spit forth a frothy pink glob that I soon came to know as the leavings of one Jim Ed Summers. Merciful Jesus, but it did make a sticky old mess out of that boy. Weren't enough parts of him left to slip in their mailbox. Made me powerful sorry to see Jim Ed go like that. He was dumb as a tote sack of hammers. We didn't deserve that. I swung up the boom arm on that track hoe and let loose in that shunker's back, up close to its neck. Yeller green goo gushed out of its spine and up onto the coal-covered ground. When it finally kicked over and went claws up, I saw Daddy Paw's hand reach out of the hole I'd tore in its back. I jumped off that track hoe while it was still rolling, grabbed Daddy Paw's hand with a powerful yank, and drug him up out of that smelly bastard's gut. It made a sound like a rubber boot coming up out of a muddy suck hole. I spun round and looked Daddy Paw square in the eyes. I declare his face looked like someone had went to work on him with a dinner fork. Didn't matter to me none. I was just damn glad he was okay. Daddy Paw told me on more than one instance how them high-paid boss folks, foremen and such, never seemed to show up till all the dirty work was done. Damned if he wasn't right on that too. No sooner than we dusted the rotted fruit and stringy gut leavings from our hair, here come the awfulest mess of suit and tie wearing higher-ups I'd ever laid eyes on. Not one of them 3-piecers so much as asked me or Daddy Paw the time of day. Before long, a whole crew of men waded in and set to shouting orders and shuffling shit around. Quicker than that whole damn train had jumped the tracks, they had that creepy orange and black fruit car with the evil silver moons buried in the ground with the track hose sitting square on top of it. The fruit beast was burnt up in a roaring fire touched off with a goodly amount of coal oil and broke up railroad ties. I'm right proper and sure I heard it screech for a good 5 minutes when they first touched a match to it. Daddy Paw and me, we got shuffled off to some big school bus-looking thing with every imaginable thing stuffed inside. A powerful pretty red-headed nurse went to work on my arm.
She stitched that gash up while holding my hand and talking real soft and natural to me. Don't mind saying I liked that a great deal. For the next 3 or 4 hours, we was treated up like royalty. Had me the best pan-fried steak I ever set a knife and fork to. Daddy Paul tried one of them things that they call a shrimp cocktail. He was powerful puzzled about how you was supposed to go about drinking such a crazy concoction. They patted his back and whispered in his ear more times than I could count. Reminded me of one of them hard-heeled, used car salesmen over in Pine Fork that was always nagging Daddy Paul about trading up for a newer truck. Low on the month payments, easy finance, extended warranty on the engine. Daddy Paul allowed as how them Lightfoots couldn't give him no payment lower than 0, which is what he owed on his Ford. Told them old boys right to their white-toothed faces, too, on more than one occasion. Didn't stop him from pestering the hell out of him, though. After all that stitching, patting, and chatting was over, them old boys begun hauling ass out of that rail yard faster than they rolled in. Weren't nothing much left for us to do but pile back in the truck and go home. Once people found out who Daddy Paul was and where he lived, he had to quit his rail yard job. He didn't really mind all that much. Made more money signing his autograph and smiling for the cameras and such. That, and the check he gets every month from the Shaw Fruit and Vegetable Express Company, has kept him fine-tuned and fit as a fiddle. Some say it weren't nothing more than shut-up money, but Daddy Paul never really cared. He was the one and only resident in all of Park Falls County that had a brand new truck and knew the truth of the Strunke City derail. Except me, of course, and I ain't saying shit.
Yes, our guests have taken their permanent seats. From New York to time infinite. Are you ready to join them? Perhaps another story will lure you. Choose a car, any car, for the time we had a permanent guest. As they tell their tales of horror at its best. Come, yeah, join me. My name is Terror, who rides the rails eternally upon the terror train.
Survived this trek? No turning back. Dare resist, just try. Step back inside, we'll be your guide. So many ways to die. Upon this ride, nowhere to hide. With us, you shall remain. Upon this ride, this hellish ride, we call the Terror Train.
Terror Train, Podcast Episode 107, Indiana. Produced by Krista Grabowski, David Schutz II, and Mary Genevieve Fortier. Podcast directed and arranged by David Schutz II. The Conductor, your narrator, was created by and played by David Schutz II. Terror, the Disembodied Voice, was created by and played by Mary Genevieve Fortier. Terror Train Podcast opening and closing poems written by Mary Genevieve Fortier. Host segment dialogue for Terror, the Disembodied Voice, written by Mary Genevieve Fortier. Production music: The House of Leaves, Chase Pulse, The Hive, and The Voices by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com. Featured work: Strunke City Derail, written by Murphy Edwards. Production music: Clean Soul, The Dread, Return of Lazarus, Gathering Darkness, Land of the Dead, and Jarvik 8 by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com. Additional sound effects by AudioSoundClips.com. Podcast program edited by David Schutz II. The stories and poems presented in the Terror Train podcasts are all featured in the James Wardkirk Publishing Anthology, Terror Train, which was edited by Krista Grabowski and A. Henry Keene. Cover art by Stephen Cooney. Content copyright 2014. Terror Train, Podcast Episode 107, Indiana. Copyright 2014.